And the more you know who you are and what you want, the less you let things upset you.
Hi everybody. So it's been a minute since I've sat down in front of the camera and just talked to it, you know. So hi camera, hi everybody watching. So right now I'm in Colorado Springs and it has been a long time since I've flown this far west. I feel like I've been stuck in the cold region of the States right now. Everybody's been talking about the really cold temperatures right now in Chicago. That's at least what I'm experiencing, but the first really cold temperature that I experienced was on a 2-day trip where I went to Fargo, North Dakota, and it was -19 out at night when I did my walk around the plane. I was not prepared for that. I could not breathe at one moment because it was so cold. I'm back from Hawaii. Don't really know if I still have my tan left. I got a little bit of burn for sure, but it was so good to get away. Horrible coming back. I mean, the day we got back, it was like 6 degrees and I thought that was really cold. I did not see the -20 coming. Did my best to bring back the nice warm weather from Hawaii and it just didn't work. So it's been like a week since I got back, but a little bit of story time. Yesterday was supposed to be day 1 of our 4-day trip. I was supposed to be at the airport at 7:20 in the morning. It started off with a Pittsburgh turn. So we go Chicago, Pittsburgh, Chicago. When we got back after the turn, we were gonna go Chicago on a Deadhead to Richmond, Virginia. I posted the Pittsburgh turn so that I could start back in Chicago at like 11:30 in the morning instead of having to be there at 7:20. I was flying in from my parents the day before. With all the crazy Chicago weather, I wasn't sure I was gonna get in early and I wanted to make sure I had enough time to get enough rest. So somebody picked it up, so I didn't have to be at the airport until 11:30. Then the flight got canceled, so I got a new Deadhead flight that wasn't until like 5:30 in the evening. Cool, got more time at home. So I get to the airport and since it was only one Deadhead and I didn't have any flights after, I don't have to be in uniform, so I was going like incognito. One less day of uniform wear that I, you know, have to wear. Long story long, we ended up sitting on the plane for 4.5 hours. It was snowing in Chicago, it was so cold. We had to get de-iced and anti-ice fluid on us so that when we take off, there's no ice that's gonna stick to the wings. The taxi was so long that the anti-ice fluid had failed because there's only a certain amount of time that you can have that sit on your wings before it's like pointless. It did all it can do. So we had to taxi back for a new application, but while we were in line waiting for new anti-ice, then they decided that they weren't gonna have enough fuel by the time we got finished getting more anti-ice fluid. Had to taxi back to a gate, get more fuel, get anti-ice again. By the time this was all done, the flight crew had been already working all day and they met their match that the FAA allows you to fly and work in one day. We go back to a gate, they had to get a new crew. At this point, the company messaged me online and had rearranged the schedule. So we went back to the gate, I got off, the rest of my crew got off. They now wanted us to stay in Chicago for the night since that's our domicile, that's our base. They were gonna change it so that we deadhead in the morning and they like cut out a leg for the day 2, which is today. So today then consisted of just a deadhead from Chicago to Denver. Then we flew from Denver to Colorado Springs. But then the flight that we were originally supposed to fly this morning from Richmond to Denver was delayed because they had to get all these reserve crews on it. So then we had to wait for our original plane to show up. It was probably really confusing. It's been such a hot mess. Then I find out today from the captain that the original Pittsburgh turn that I posted for somebody else to fly for me ended up getting canceled. When that happens, we get pay protected, at least. Probably whoever picked up that turn for me was anticipating it getting canceled. They picked it up so that they would not have to work and get paid for it. But at least I got paid for the canceled Deadhead that evening. I mean, I sat on the plane for 4.5 hours. We didn't go anywhere, but I get paid for the Deadheads for that chunk of time anyway. What I wanted to do right now is finish up that question and answer process that I started. I didn't get to answer all the questions that you guys sent me and that I've received over time. So I just wanted to follow up and maybe answer a few more. Yeah, so let's get started. This person asks, as a pilot, is your work timetable flexible enough to allocate some family time, maybe to take a leave or to cancel some flights during functions or festivals, or do you find it difficult to have quality family time? I feel like it's dependent on your definition of, you know, what is your quality family time. I don't find it difficult. It may just not be the same as a lot of normal, like, 5-day a week, 9-to-5 schedules are, you know, because I can't be home every weekend. I can't be there for dinner every week. I don't just work during the day. So the definition of normal when it comes to like lifestyle and relationships, that's what is such a shock to a lot of people, I think. Once you work around that, then I found it to be really easy to go home. The only struggle is when I get to go see my family on what is like my weekend. It's not necessarily their weekend. So my 2 younger sisters are both in college right now. So unless they have a snow day and it gets canceled, or it's the weekend for them, or it's a spring break, Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, whatever, they might be out during the day or home doing homework, studying or whatever, and then I'm there chilling during the day doing nothing. So it's really nice being home to visit them, and I can go kind of whenever I want to. But the reason why I did move to Chicago was so that I wasn't constantly traveling at the beginning and end of every trip to avoid hotels or my crash pad. Let's see, next one. Sophia asks, when and why did you decide to become a pilot? It was kind of a process. I thought about it in high school. I kind of wrote it off because I didn't know how to go about it. I thought you had to like know people or go through the military, and I had nobody to reach out to and ask questions. YouTube was around, but I didn't think to like come on here and, you know, look stuff up or personal accounts or anything. So yeah, but I didn't actually decide to pursue it until I was about 20. Larry asks, are people taken back by the fact that you're the pilot when, I don't know why there's quotes on that, when you're not the stereotypical middle-aged mustache rocking male type? Yeah, I'm not that type. Yeah, I get different reactions, I'd say. It depends. Sad to say, but you know, there are stereotypes and that's fine, but stereotypes a lot of times are built off of statistics and a lot of different factors. So this is not really the question, but I'm not even like offended by the fact that there are stereotypes of most pilots are dudes. That's mainly just because more guys are interested in like engines and buttons. I don't know. You know, girls have different interests generally, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing that should be praised that like, oh, girls have overcome so much to be doing this job now. The overcoming only comes from maybe other people's reactions towards us or how they treat us, but really it's like, that just means I may have an interest in stuff that normally guys do. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, the reactions. A lot of the time from like the middle-aged women, those are the ones that I get the like, you go girl, or like the high fives and stuff like that. I get the excitement from them. Some of the old dudes, a lot of positivity and or surprise, pleasantly surprised, I don't know. There have been some older people who maybe as they're exiting the aircraft and I'm like saying goodbye to people, they go past me and they try to say like good landing to the captain or something, but it was my leg to land, and so the captain like has to correct them and says like, oh no, actually like she landed that one. And the two that I remember, they were very positive and they were like, oh really, that was like the smoothest thing, yada yada, you know. There's been one negative one that I will remember. He was an older gentleman. He was walking down the aisle, carrying his bag, looking, you know, just as eyes wander. And he's walking up the aisle and he sees the flight attendant, pleasant face, and then he looks at me and then he goes, and then he exits the aircraft. And I'm like, I didn't know how to take it. I just smiled. I don't know if he was frustrated that we couldn't provide him a smoother ride, because the landing, might I say, was not anything to scowl about. Yeah, I haven't gotten any negative comments or anything in person. I know it'll come eventually. It's part of the fun, right? To shock people. Somebody says, loving the channel, thank you. Do you have a favorite airport? And would you like to do some flying in Europe if you haven't already? I mean, I'd like to do flying and traveling anywhere, so yeah, I wouldn't not want that. And a favorite airport? You know, this is gonna be so opposite to like what everybody in my bubble feels, but I really love the like arrival into either LaGuardia or JFK. It doesn't get old. I've only been outside in New York like once and it has always been something that has attracted me. I'm getting that fix from Chicago. Really just flying into New York and doing the early morning flights where the sun is rising as we're showing up. It wows me every single time. I mean, the airport itself and the airport operations is a hot mess and we all do our best, but everybody that flies into LaGuardia knows it's got its reputation, but it never gets old. The approach into there, I love it. I mean, the view, that's mainly what I'm talking about. Not the ATC, not the speeds, not the hecticness of it, not the airport operations, not the crowdedness, not the lines, not the waits, not the delays, but really the view is like the silver lining every time I go into there, and I just love it. And I don't know if anybody's ever been able to see this or noticed it. When we're flying in and the sun is just high enough, we can't see the reflection of the sun off of the buildings that are just like at a 90-degree angle, but we can see it off of Freedom Tower. Early morning flights into there or the evening flights where the sun is kind of setting, if the sun is high enough and not low enough, it is designed a certain way where it like each side of the building, as it goes up, they start curving in. It's almost like they took pieces like this and fit it. I don't know if I'm making sense. The sides of the building actually start angling up. So there's been multiple times where I'm flying in there and it is like the first thing I can see from like miles and miles out because the sun is reflecting off of it. And it every single time it just makes me think that like whoever designed the building was like, all the planes out there, when you're showing up here to New York, this is the one that you're gonna see first, as like a royal bird to the world saying like, you know, we rise from the ashes. And I'm getting all sentimental. I'm not even from there, but anyway, I digress. What was your first feeling when you walked into the training area for the airline? Oh, so many feelings. A little bit of being overwhelmed, mostly like excitement, a lot of nerves. At that moment, it was like the peak of where this road to building up to this moment, it was like all so surreal, you know, long process to get there. But then I knew it was gonna be such hard work from that point on. So it was like this perfect moment where you're like, okay, the crazy studying hasn't begun yet and I'm still all like in awe of it. Hannah Bartman wants to know my list of cons of being a commercial pilot. She's always thought about being a pilot, but she feels like there are more cons than there are talked about, as with everything else. I feel like you're so right, Hannah, that there's cons with like every career, I can't say cons because this is all based on like a personal feeling about what you do. I will say the cons for me have been acclimating to the lifestyle. For me, the reason why I fly has nothing to do with like the actual lifestyle of my daily job. A lot of the daily job type of things are actually the cons for me, which sounds totally opposite. But growing up, all I knew is that whenever I found my career and my job, what I didn't want was to wear a uniform. I didn't want to work in a cubicle, and I wanted to work with lots of people. When I finally landed on becoming a pilot, the main reason why I wanted to do it was because I really wanted to travel and see the world, and that was the one thing that really gave me joy and made me feel like fulfilled, like I could get out and breathe and not be like, I don't know, stuck in my hometown. So that's just my personal feeling. It was kind of shocking to me when I reflected on it. I was like, okay, so the pro for me was so great that it overcame the cons. Now I'm wearing a uniform every single day. I'm basically in a cubicle with one other person with a really great view though. Another struggle for me has been getting used to like no routine, and I guess that's my own fault. I need to create a routine for myself, but it has been such a struggle to get the motivation. I keep complaining about it, but it's all me. Finding the motivation and the energy to do workouts and stay on top of that when I'm on the road. Keeping my diet in check has been easier. Just getting creative with what I bring, because I feel really gross when I don't eat healthy. My diet is not perfect at all, but I do what I can, and it's constantly evolving in a better direction. Working out was something that was so ingrained in my like everyday life. I was going 5 to 7 days a week if I could, when I had like a daily routine. Unless you've got like one thing in your life that you can make a living doing where you love every aspect of it, go do it if you can make a living at it. But otherwise, there's gonna be the cons, but you gotta know how you wanna handle those cons, you know, and work around them. For me, the main thing is that I love flying, I love aviation, but I'm not like the world's biggest aviation nerd. I don't live and breathe it. When I'm not working, I wanna have a life outside of that, and that's gonna keep me invested and interested in my job and my career. Bill asks, my parents don't want me to be a pilot. Should I still become one? Well, that's sounds like a personal problem, but I'd say that depends on you. I don't know, Bill. I don't know your parents. If you want to become one and you can become one without their blessing and you think it's a smart move, then yeah. Nick says, any advice for a guy new to flying? Private pilot starts for me next week. And this was 3 weeks ago. So sorry, Nick, for getting back to you so late. Hope it's going well. I think there's advice at like every phase of the training process. For me, the advice that I would need at that phase, back to 21-year-old Rachel, was you're stronger than you think. So when things get tough, if all of us out here can do it, you can do it too. It really just takes some dedication. Like mind over matter, it's gonna get stressful at times. It's gonna get scary and hard at times. Usually anything worth doing is not gonna come that easy. Bill also asks, do you need a bachelor's degree to be an airline pilot for the regionals? No. So unless that company itself requires you to have one, which they can do, it's not generally a requirement. So I don't have one yet. And I'm here at a regional airline. They have an hour requirement, but that's based off of what the FAA tells them they need to require to fly passengers for a Part 121 airline. Sammers, I think, wants to know what it's like working in a mostly male-dominated field. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I don't notice it that often. I don't know why. It's just, I'm just so used to working with guys because I've been doing this for a while. Even before that, I didn't work in any type of industry where it was mostly girls or anything. So Eric Nelson asks, if you could start training over, what would you do different to get your current position the fastest? And what things would you avoid? My goal when I first started flight training wasn't to get here the fastest necessarily. So if I were gonna go redo it over again, then there are things I would have changed. But when I went through my process, it wasn't to get here the fastest. Mainly, I think having the energy to fly more and train more. When I was a student, I was working as well as training, and so there's one thing I could have done to do it faster is just not work and just only train, and then also just flying on the weekends. I usually took my weekends off because I had my friends, my sister out there living with me at the time. I had a relationship at the time. I had other things I wanted to do. Another option that you can do is flying outside of your instructing job or whatever you're doing, is having multiple sources of flights. I was only instructing. One of my classmates, he was like a part owner in a small single engine plane where he could go fly that whenever he wasn't instructing. And so if his like students weren't available to fly, he could go fly that and still, you know, build his hours. And as far as the math is concerned and the timing, I'm not really sure what would be fastest for, you know, whoever's situation. I did the Part 91 training portion, and then I had to instruct up to 1,500 hours. But another option is to go through a 4-year university where you're getting your degree, getting all your flight training out of the way, because you're at a 141 school. If I'm not mistaken, you only need to go up to 1,000 hours before you can go to the regionals, and you already have your 4-year degree under your belt. However, it took you 4 years, and so you still got to build up, like instructing or doing whatever, to build up to 1,000. And then you still need a certain amount of time at the regionals before you can even go on to upgrade as captain at the regionals, and then you'd still need a certain amount of time before you can go to the main line. So I don't know the logistics of all those little details about how that would line up. Donovan asks if the ATP flight school is a good choice. If you could redo your training, would you go a different route? I feel like you can't really go wrong with ATP unless it doesn't work well with like your lifestyle or your finances or the time that you can dedicate to flight training. It worked for me. You know, if you work with the program will work with you. It's not the cheapest, it's not the most expensive, but it is definitely a very fast way to get all your ratings. If I could redo my training, I would not go a different route wholly. I think the only thing I might change if I redid it over again is to get my private rating before I went to ATP. The one thing I noticed when I went there was that I was a nervous wreck whenever I was a student. My defense mechanism is to like procrastinate and like run for the hills and quit. It's not a good quality of mine, but I recognize it. One thing I realized was that the students around me that came into ATP, already having their private license, they had already developed a love for flying and a joy outside of it being like a school environment. So when I joined the program, it was like really condensed and boom, 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 study, study, study. And it was like overwhelming for me. And it was all so new and scary. I didn't really develop like the joy of just hopping in a plane, renting it, going out here for lunch, or like taking my family flying and stuff. So I think the only change I would do is maybe go get my private license elsewhere. How long from day one till working for airline? For me, it was almost exactly 4 years, from 0 hours until training at the airline. When you got out of school, what route did you go to build hours? After I did all my flight school and flight training with ATP, I didn't do anything corporate or anything like that. I just did flight instruction. Kirk says, what is the most fatigued that you have ever been when working in an aircraft, and how did you battle it? First off, I've never been fatigued. I'm safe checklist. But on a scale from bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, coffee, pre-workout, water, good sleep, all that jazz, and then over here is like, it's at the end of the day, I'd like to be in bed instead of working right now. That's the max. How do you battle it? Well, first is to identify if you are at all tired or feeling like not yourself. You've got to recognize it in yourself, especially for your co-pilot, your captain, or your first officer. Get it out there in the open, because if you're not fatigued, you're just not feeling yourself. It's your call up there. So if you're not feeling safe, get out of the flight deck. But if you're just identifying it as something that could be a threat, then it's easier to mitigate it by acknowledging it and saying, this is how I'm gonna handle it. So whatever works for you. For me, usually like getting up and walking around, that helps me get the blood flowing. Hydrating, I always feel like I can hydrate my brain, wake up that way. So bottom line is, you never fly fatigued, and you should always like know your personal limitations on like where you feel unsafe, you know. Always imagine your family in the back, but either way, it's not like if you were to have any type of safety issues that people in the back are the only ones to suffer. Like, you're up there as well, so it would be silly to risk your own and everyone's safety. Tracker asks, is it good to study theory for airline pilot exams before I even start my pilot school? I don't really know what you mean by theory for airline pilot exams. I feel like you can like get your feet wet when it comes to like studying stuff up before that day comes, but there's so much to learn in aviation, and there's like big kahuna pieces of information that you need to learn that are going to carry through from like private pilot to the airlines or cargo or charter, corporate, traffic watch. Then there's like the fluff stuff that like you will never come across after you learn that bit. So I feel like it's hard to say exactly what you should learn ahead of time. So many things are like building blocks, but I feel like any basic private pilot study guide is gonna be beneficial. That's usually like what all the building blocks are based off of, your private and your instrument rating. Armand asks, did you get to choose which hub you were based out of? If not, is it easy or hard to switch? So we do get to put in like our first, second, third, fourth choice for which hub we want to be based out of. And then it's based on company need and seniority and what you want. So they take it into consideration. So within our company, Chicago is a pretty junior base, but it's constantly changing. When I was finishing training, everybody kept telling me Chicago, that's what you're gonna get. So I kind of knew ahead of time that that's what my chances were. And it happened to just work out because at the time I was gonna be commuting from my parents' house, and that was the closest commute, and there were directs from Huntsville to Chicago anyway. So I chose to keep it as my base. And then now, is it easy to switch once you got one? It depends, because every company is gonna have their like junior bases and then their like more senior bases. I think it's usually just based on desire of the bulk of the pilot group. If I wanted to go to like LA right now, that's pretty senior. And so if I were to try to get based out there, I don't know when I would be granted that, but if I got granted that, my seniority based on like my employee number would probably be really low. And so I would be on reserve for who knows how long. And then once I got a line and like regular trips, they probably wouldn't be the best anyway. And so when you're not getting really great trips, it's harder to manipulate your schedule to give you like time off or work around like family events. For me, it made more sense to just stay in Chicago, tough it out for the winter, get to see my family more often and easier, and be able to get seniority more. So if it's a junior base, that generally means that that's where they're putting the newer people. So if they put the newer people like under you, then that's bumping you up in the seniority. Generally, if they put a bunch of new people in Chicago, as people get more senior, then they move out to other bases, making more room. So if that's junior, that's where people normally get first and then they move elsewhere. You can move up in seniority quicker, and then that means you can get better schedules quicker and more power with seniority. Everything that I've learned in the airline world thus far has been everything is based on seniority, quality of life, pay, all that kind of jazz. Okay, so this is kind of hard to read. Shamina says, as a pilot, you travel to one place, no? So how many days you can stay there? And you will have any work to do on that time, or you will always free and enjoy the city? So I think they're trying to ask, like, I know the places that I'm going to and how many days I stay there. So generally when we have trips, they're like 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, or 4 day trips. Say it's a 3 day trip, then we spend 2 nights in cities for the evening. They can vary from 10 hours from the time we open the main cabin door and let people off, travel to the hotel, sleep, wake up at the hotel, travel to the airport, and have to be at the airport. The minimum that they can give us is 10 hours because they have to at least get the pilots 8 hours behind closed doors to try to get sleep. So it can range from 10 hours, which we call like a min rest overnight, or it can go as great as like 30 something hours. That would mean you have like a lost day is what some people kind of call it. I've not done that. I've just had friends do it. So you may have one whole day somewhere, but that's not that common. Generally, they're between like 13 to 19 hour overnights. The one I'm on right now is like 16 and a half hour overnight. I got here to Colorado Springs at noon. I'll have to wake up tomorrow morning at 4 because our van is at 5 to get to the airport at 5:15. I think I tried to answer the question. I think that's what I got from the question. I think they were trying to also ask if I have to work on that empty time maybe, or if I'm free to enjoy the city. Sometimes we might be given like a 19-hour overnight generally, but then like say we got delayed, our overnight will get shorter and shorter and shorter, but it can't go shorter than that 10-hour window that I told you about. If it got to that point, then they would have to like change something in the morning to push it later to give us that 10-hour window. The only other type of like work that we have to do outside of flying is when we do our CBTs, which is our computer-based training. Like every quarter they put out these like training modules, basically just to keep up with recurrent training, keep us fresh and stuff like that, and they have deadlines, and so we have some to do right now that are due at the end of the month, but they do pay us for that. So a lot of people like to do those on our overnights, or if like we have a long sit between 2 legs, sometimes people will do it then because they want to get paid while they're getting paid as opposed to doing them at home. So even though you're getting paid for them, people, I don't know, they call it like double dipping. And then the last question they asked was how many off days will pilots get in a week and how many working days in a month. So that is totally dependent on people's personal desires as well as their seniority. So this month I have 13 days off, and 2 chunks of that time I have 4 days off in a row at one point, and then I have 5 days off in a row at another point, and then I have the next days off are 2 days in a row, and then another 2 days in a row. Every month is different. If I wanted to buy more time for myself, then I can try to post these trips for other people to fly and then build more time for myself. Also, every month we like bid for our schedule for the next month, so I can ask for the minimum amount of work to fly. There's a lot of options. Generally, you're gonna be going on 2 to 4 day trips, the regional level at least, with 2 to 4 days off between each trip. Anyway, so that is it for the questions that I have so far. This video is probably like extra long as it is, and the sun is going down, as you can probably tell. The lighting in here has gotten all yellow and weird. I'm about to go walk over to Target and then come back here, try to do a workout before I hit the hay. That's all I've got for today. I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to everybody who sent me any questions. All right, see you guys.
And the more you know who you are and what you want, the less you let things upset you.